All right, welcome to Western Civ. We left off with trouble in the church. Bad things are happening in the Catholic Church. So let's just to recap a little bit. We have the Avignon popes in the 1300s. One of the popes had moved to Avignon, and then there's a series of popes after that living in the city of Avignon and basically under control of the French king. And then we had a great schism where there were 2 popes and then 3 popes. And then finally it was solved by a Council of Constance, meeting of bishops and cardinals coming together to get back to one pope in the year 1417. Now the year 1417 isn't the year that we need to necessarily memorize, but 1517 is. That's going to be the important year. So it's just 100 years from the time they're back to one pope and healed that wound to everything's going to come crashing down. This is the period of the Reformation. This is what we're heading for, looking at the Reformation. From the 1300s, there's already people calling for reform, the need to change, and then it's all going to come crashing down in 1517 when a very important event happens. So let's build up to 1517. Let's see what's happening here in the Reformation. Well, we start in jolly old England, a guy named John Wycliffe, living here in the middle of the 1300s. And what is he looking at? Well, you have to remember the 1300s in England, you're fighting this war with France. The 100 Years' Wars are going on. You've got the Avignon popes. And England's on the outskirts of Europe, so he's allowed to kind of protest against the church a little bit. Some of the things he looks at is what's happening with the clergy. These men of the church are getting wealthy. They're collecting these tithes and kind of keeping it. People are becoming poor as the church is becoming wealthy. And then this Avignon pope, obviously, this pope who lives underneath the French king's control, you know, why should England have to deal with this man who's obviously a puppet of the French king? And then as he goes on to investigate more things about the church, one of the things he's going to look at is, why is it in Latin? Why is the Bible in Latin? And why is the church service in Latin? This language of the Romans, this strange language lost through the Dark Ages now. And he is going to make the move to translate it into English. And he does this. He's going to make his own Bible into English. His followers in this movement are called Lollards, the Lollard movement in England. And it becomes quite large. And of course, once the 100 Years' War is over, and once the Council of Constance meets, they will actually come to England. The Catholic Church will make the move to England, and by this time he's dead. Wycliffe's dead, but they will actually dig him up, burn his bones as a heretic, try to collect these Bibles, declare the Bible illegal, this English Bible, and some of them will survive. A few of them will be put away, but you know, the reaction of the Catholic Church is, this is a big no-no. This could get you killed. Well, it doesn't stop the movement. Our next guy that's going to try to make some changes is a guy named Jan Hus. Now, your book might call him John Hus, but I prefer you call him Jan because he's a Czech. And he is going to look at Wycliffe and see what happened with Wycliffe in England and make his own Bible, a Czech Bible for the Czechs. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about Bohemia, the Czech people living in Bohemia. Today, it's a Czech republic right in the middle of Europe. So this isn't far from Rome. This is right in the heart of everything. Today, it's quite beautiful. A couple of pictures of Bohemia. They have their old castles. They're still standing. They weren't destroyed in World War II. And also they're famous for their beer. Some Czech cities such as Pilsen, quite world famous, and Budějovice, where they have the original Budweiser beer. Every town has a brewery, just famous for their beer and for their beautiful castles. And they're industrious people here. And so here's a page from Hus's Bible as he translates it into Czech. And this starts a huge movement, this reform of the Catholic Church. His followers are called Hussites. One of the other things he protests about is the communion, the Eucharist, the Catholic Eucharist. In the Last Supper, now that you could read the Bible for yourself, it says that Jesus gave his disciples bread, they ate it, he gave them wine, and they drank it. Well, in the Catholic Church at this time, you only got the piece of bread. The priest would drink the chalice of wine. And so this becomes one of his battle cries here. Hus holding up the chalice, the Last Supper chalice, that this should be for everyone, not just for the few. The argument of the Catholic Church was that, you know, if some of this wine gets spilled, that's some of Christ's blood being spilled. So he couldn't trust it to the common man. But Hus says that it belongs to everybody. This is part of his movement to change things. Well, he's doing his thing a little bit later than Wycliffe, and the Council of Constance will call him in. Again, this is the same council that dug up Wycliffe's bones and burned them. They will call him to a Council of Constance. And I think you can pretty much know what the ruling's going to be here. Yep. They're going to condemn him as a heretic, and he's not dead yet, and they're going to burn him. He will be burned at the stake, the burning of Jan Hus. This doesn't end it. These Hussites, these Bohemians continue. This is what's called the Hussite War, as the Catholic Church will have to enter Bohemia and try to forcibly take this movement down, and these Bohemians fight back. Lots of wars for many years of the Hussites trying to defend themselves. You'll end up with kind of a stalemate there in Bohemia as these Bohemians do what they want to do. This is actually where we get the word Bohemian from, the idea that you challenge authority, a Bohemian. Well, let's look at some more church problems here, because the problems are piling up. People are beginning to investigate and want reforms here. Well, let's look at some other things they're looking at here. One is the Pope himself. When there was the Avignon papacy, when you had a pope who wasn't living in Rome anymore, well, some of his properties began to get away from him, and now that he's back in Rome, he wants these properties back. So you'll actually see popes with armies trying to regain his states. And of course, this makes him look like a king. He's enforcing feudal law. It's not just about your soul, it's about feudalism here. And then the word nepotism comes up all the time. Nepotism, it's a common thing. I mean, even modern times, even in Roman and Greek times, people always want to help their family out. But in the church, the church is supposed to be men of learned men who are responsible for your soul. And when they're helping out their family members, that's maybe not the best person in charge of your soul. The word nepotism comes from the word nepo, meaning nephew, helping out a family member. This also applies to the Catholic Church, where a churchman isn't allowed to marry and isn't supposed to have children. And some of these churchmen will be helping out their nephew. Sometimes it really is their nephew, their brother's son, but other times it's just a boy that is his nephew. I think you know what I'm talking about here. So a lot of people talking about this, of how did these people come to power in the church. Another word that pops up is the word simony. You need to know what this word means. It means to buy a church office. So if someone doesn't just hand you one from a family member, you can buy one. If you are a millionaire, you can buy a place in the church. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, power, prestige. You could buy one for a family member to put one of your sons or nephews in a spot. And then you could also, you're planning on making the money back. Again, in the Catholic Church back then, everybody pays a tithe. This is the one church in town, and you will pay a tithe. The word tithe means 1/10 of your income will go to the church. And of course, you will have to pay this. This isn't an option. Because if you don't pay it, you're no longer a member of the church. You can be excommunicated out of the church. And who's going to record your marriage? Who's going to record births in your family? Who's going to do any record keeping at all for your family? Because the church does all of that at this time. So simony, to buy a church office, and then you're expecting some money back on this. And then to make matters worse, as we hit the 1500 mark, there is 3 bad popes in a row. I'm going to go through each one of them here. You don't need to write them down right now. I'm going to go through each one of them as they are going to go from worst to okay and then bad. So 3 bad ones in a row. And of course, we're looking for the date 1517, which is going to hit right there, and all hell's going to break loose, literally. The worst pope ever is a man named Alexander VI, and he'll be there from 1492, so right at the turn of the century there. He's Spanish. Spain, again, is very powerful. 1492, they've united. And here comes a Spanish man. He's extremely rich, from the richest family in Spain, the Borgia family. And this is an obvious case of nepotism and simony. He has bought this position, and also he was helped by his uncle. His uncle had been pope and moved him up the ladder. This man makes no bones about having a nephew. No, they're children. He openly presents his children and his mistresses. Perhaps maybe you've heard of some of his kids. He has a boy named Cesare, a daughter named Lucretia. They'll become quite famous in Italy, all over Italy at this time. Everyone knows this family. And of course, everyone in Spain knew them, and now everyone in Italy knows them, and all around Europe. They know of the Borgia family. This is your pope. Cartoons of him. This is a cartoon here showing the pope. And then as a monster, they've elected a monster as the pope at this time. Pope Julius II is next. He was from a rival family, so after the Borgia family comes a rival family to the Borgias. Julius II, not the worst pope ever, but he's known for waging war. He will be the pope at the time the French are invading Italy, trying to take out these little tiny states. He is the pope, and he will have to gather armies and wage war against the French. As the French are invading Italy, this will be the end of the Renaissance as these French armies come rampaging through. Now's the time you don't need to be having art because the French are going to steal it from you if you have it. He is most famous, Julius II, for commissioning this work here. In a chapel at the Vatican, he is going to have the whole chapel repainted and redone by Michelangelo. And it's quite a great work of art, just the peak of the Renaissance here at 1500. The Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo will paint from the top of the ceiling the Old Testament stories, and then around the sides of the chapel the New Testament stories. And it is the peak of the Renaissance. This painting here is probably the most famous, the one of God creating Adam, because this pretty much encapsulates the Renaissance. This is Renaissance humanism. Look at the picture here. There's God. God is a human. Creating Adam is a human, creating him in his own image. You are an image of God. You're a God. You are endowed with great things. You're not inherently sinful and heading to hell necessarily. This was what the Catholic Church had been teaching, that you're sinful and are going to be going to hell, and if it wasn't for the church. Well, this is the idea now in the Renaissance, as it reaches its peak here, is that you are not sinful. You are a wonderful creature and a wonderful thing. And then these other paintings here, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And then you finish up on the back wall of the chapel with the second coming of Jesus. There he is. He's been in the gym. He's quite ripped. And there's Virgin Mary. And on this side, you've got him taking people up to heaven. And on this side, casting people down into hell. The last judgment. You'd better get right. Michelangelo was kind of a funny artist. He would put his friends over here on this side and put his enemies over here on this side, including the Pope. Pope Julius II was painted in on this side as one of the people going to hell. He and Michelangelo got in a lot of fights over the commissioning of the art and the payment for the art. And then the third of these bad popes, Leo X. His story is, as he becomes pope, is that he'd been made a cardinal at 13. Why? Because he's from the Medici family, the richest family in Italy. He has obviously just bought his way up the ladder all the way to pope. He has a famous quote as he becomes pope, is, "Let's enjoy the office that has been given to us." And so just the height of decadence here. And everyone's aware of it. There's no one questioning how this guy got to be pope. Well, his big thing, he wants to outdo the pope before him. He's going to redo the entire church, St. Peter's Basilica, with these wings on the side and a giant church in the middle. Unbelievable church. It's a beautiful church still standing today, and it is awe-inspiring. Well, to do this, though, this isn't a small chapel. This is a giant cathedral. He's going to need more money than anyone's ever seen before. Unbelievable amounts of money going in this project for the greatest artist of the age. Well, to do this, you're going to need money from all over Europe. So all over Europe, the tithes are increased. The money called for to come down to Rome to build St. Peter's Cathedral. And it is quite beautiful. The outside is beautiful. The inside is just magnificent. The Pope's entire city, the Vatican City, is redone, the centerpiece here. But people are talking, what's going on here? All this money just being sucked out of Europe down to the Vatican. Let's look at a few more church abuses as people are talking about just everything going on here. The pluralism. The simony's gotten so bad that you can buy not only one office, you can buy as many as you want. Several church offices. And of course, that's going to lead to absenteeism. Who's your bishop? Who's your cardinal? Well, it doesn't matter because they never come around anyway. They're some German guy or some French guy. You'd never see them. And this would just tell you, look, just deal with your local priest. Concubines. We talked about Alexander VI openly admitting he has his children. Well, now this kind of becomes the trend here that you don't need to hide it anymore. Just have your openly show your concubine, your woman that's bearing your children. And then another thing comes up is monasticism. Well, now, monasticism and monks aren't necessarily a bad thing. Going back to the Dark Ages, monks had basically saved Christianity. When the Roman Empire fell, monasteries will exist through the Dark Ages and preserving all the Roman knowledge, preserving all the Christian knowledge. But that was 1,000 years ago. Pretty much exactly 1,000 years ago. And so these monasteries on top of the hills here, they're beautiful, and they preserve Christianity for 1,000 years, but are they necessary anymore? The old image of a monk, what does a monk do there? Well, they stay holy, they stay celibate, they stay away from sin, and they spend their time transcribing the holy books, preserving the knowledge. Well, this is the 1400s. As we reach 1500, and they're not necessary anymore. We have a new invention, which I'll mention in a second. We don't need people hand transcribing books anymore. So what are these monks doing? And the stories begin to circulate. Well, the old image of a monk was that they were holy. They would sometimes travel around and convert people and live a life of begging. And that's the good. But now you're starting to get images of just monks living at a monastery and stories spreading of them just living a wild life up there. And the image of the happy, drunk, fat monk. Think of Robin Hood, Friar Tuck, the happy, jolly monk. So are monks really necessary anymore? And that land is pretty valuable. So what's happening now, the big invention of why monks aren't necessary, is Gutenberg's press. A German man named Gutenberg has come up with this idea. Actually, he's stolen it from the Chinese. It's in the city of Mainz along the Rhine River. He is going beyond the printing press. Now, the printing press existed before Gutenberg does this, but the printing press was such that if you wanted to print a page, you had to carve an entire block of wood, and one for each page of the book. So a 200-page book would require 200 carvings of wood. It takes a lot of time. What his big breakthrough, Gutenberg's big breakthrough that he gets from the Chinese, is the idea of movable type. Instead of carving whole pages of a book, let's just carve the individual letters and then line them up and print it that way. So all you need to do is carve individual letters, line them up, make a page of letters, print that, rearrange the letters, and print the next page. Huge breakthrough. This will change. You can print anything you want immediately now. You could print a newspaper. Sets off a printing revolution. Well, this is happening as Leo X is calling for more and more money to come down to Rome, and he is going to go for a new way, a kind of an extravagant way of bringing more money in. It's called indulgences, the selling of indulgences. Well, what is an indulgence? Well, it's a removal of sin. Well, this goes back to the Crusades, the idea that a pope can do this. When popes had called crusades, they would say, if you went on a crusade, this will remove sin. You'll automatically go to heaven. Well, now with the printing press, start printing documents, a piece of paper that says, for amount of money, you buy this piece of paper, and it will remove sin. Your contribution to the church will remove sin. And so you'll start getting pictures like this of people bringing their money to church and buying these pieces of paper to remove sin, instead of the old-fashioned way of having to actually perform some kind of penance. So you'll start getting lots of drawings here, people bringing their money to church, and people are questioning this, the idea of removing sins for a money payment. And we have a lot of these preserved. Here's one actually handwritten over there that removes sin for 10 days. Here's another one with the official seals on it. And here's some cartoons. There's the Pope over there and people bringing their money to him for these pieces of paper. And there's even sales campaigns. This is a famous bill of calling to remind you that you need to be bringing your money to church. This was a famous one by a salesman named John Tetzel. It even says right here, as soon as coins in the box ring, souls to heaven will spring. You can get people into heaven with your money. So this is all heading down to Rome, all this big building project, and everyone's talking about it, that these indulgences, and of course the common people believe it, but the intellectual people are just in disbelief about this. Well, I want to mention another reformer here, one in Italy, a little closer to Rome here, a guy named Savonarola, a priest as we approach 1500. He's a priest here in Florence. Now, surely you should know about Florence. This is like the greatest city of the Renaissance. If you want to see some Renaissance art, you go to Florence, even today. And he will, in this great city of wealth and art, he will start preaching about these abuses. We need to stop this, all this money involved in the church and all this decadence of society. He calls for a bonfire of the vanities, his famous bonfire of the vanities, to bring out your luxury items, all this money, all these items that you're buying, and burn them, destroy them. Get away from this sin, all your jewelry, all your mirrors, all your artwork, statues, paintings, burn it all. And people begin to do this. And this is going to draw the attention of the Medici family. The Medici family, I mean, they like their art. They're the greatest patrons of the art going on. You know, that's their pride of their family. And this guy's getting people to stop buying art and start making art. They will contact the Pope, and have this man removed. Alexander VI will have this guy burned at the stake in 1498. So right in the center of Florence, he will get his own bonfire. Well, let's go on to Erasmus here. The Renaissance will move to the north now. Erasmus of Rotterdam, up in Holland, Rotterdam. And we're looking at again now into the 1500s, in the early 1500s. Erasmus is the leader of the Northern Renaissance. As the Renaissance is being stopped in Italy because of warfare, it moves to the north, and the place you'll find it is up in Holland and in England. So his guy's a writer. You know, we usually think of the Renaissance as being art. Well, it's also about the writing. What is he writing about? He's writing about the church sometimes. And what does he want? Just simple faith. Let's get back to a simple faith. Why make it so complicated? You should be able to read the Bible and think for yourself. The Bible can instruct you. Well, this is dangerous talk here, you know. If you're reading the Bible for yourself and doing it yourself, that could go against the church's teaching here. So you got to be careful, and he's very careful about this, the way he words his things. He's watching people getting burned at the stake, and he certainly doesn't want that. So he's very careful what he does. But again, he writes things about rituals. What's going on in the Catholic Church? Why are we doing all these rituals? For instance, saints. Where is this in the Bible? If you read the Bible, where do you come up with saints and them having some kind of power to bring people into heaven? What about pilgrimages? Popes were offering removal of sin if you go visit certain spots. Where is that? Relics. Coming back from the Crusades were just unbelievable amounts of relics. I mean, 3 crowns of thorns. There's enough pieces of the cross to build Noah's Ark. That was the big joke. All kinds of, anything you can think of. Strange finger bones and neck bones and jaw bones. There's all over. Every cathedral in Europe will have several relics. They're still around. If you go visit these cathedrals, you still see a few relics around, but he begins talking about these relics. They claim to have magical power. Come on. And then indulgences. This will really set him off. The indulgences. Come on. To pay money for removal of sin, that's the height of hypocrisy to him. And he writes some bestsellers. He's a great writer, and people just snap his books up. Well, what's he writing? Well, one of his books is a handbook for a Christian knight. It is what it is. How to be a Christian knight. Well, we're not fighting in wars right now, but you can still be chivalrous and be a Christian, and here's how to do it. And then his most famous book, then Praise of Folly. I'll talk more about this in a second. And then he also wrote a commentary on the New Testament. He will go through the New Testament and notate it. Keep it in Latin, but notate it as he goes. In other words, not changing the Bible here, but just kind of pointing out a few things of maybe we need to investigate these things further. Of course, just enough not to be condemned. Again, his most famous book is The Praise of Folly. This is the one that everybody would want to read. It is about a character named Folly, a goddess named Folly, who comes to this time here, and she looks at modern society, or society of the 1500s, and travels around and looks at things. And of course, it's a satire, making fun of modern society in the 1500s. All the silliness that goes on, going on pilgrimages and going to church, and what she's hearing and seeing in society, and just pointing out the silliness of society. But it gets the message across. Everybody now believes that something needs to be done. And there's a famous quote at that time, as all this is going to be coming to a head in 1517, that Erasmus has laid this egg, planted the seed, if you will, the knowledge, and everyone's talking about the church and the problems in the church. But he doesn't want to get burned. He's not going to put his life on the line. It's going to take somebody else to put themselves out there, and it's going to be a young German monk named Martin Luther who's going to hatch this egg, this problem that's been building and building.